right, welcome everyone to the first Well at Work Stories of Success webinar. My name is Kathleen Lane, and I'm the Program Director for Well at Work by EdCan. This webinar series highlights school divisions from across Canada that are making meaningful changes to support the well-being of their employees. As we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that we are living and working on the traditional territories of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. I am personally joining from the unceded territory of the Squamish people in Squamish, British Columbia. If you'd like to share your own land acknowledgement in the chat, please feel free to do so. So as I mentioned earlier, the Stories of Success webinar are just one of the ways that we're working towards our goal of embedding well-being into all aspects of the K-12 education systems across Canada in a durable and sustainable way. Other ways we do this is by providing a Well at Work advisor service to school divisions, professional learning opportunities, a pan-Canadian community of practice, and an awareness building platform that includes a variety of free resources available through our website. And today, it is my pleasure to introduce Pam Verhoeff, the Division Lead Wellness Teacher for Black Gold School Division. Black Gold was one of our early clients after launching the Well at Work advisor service. Black Gold has been making wonderful progress since their initial work with a Well at Work advisor. And today, Pam will be sharing their journey from establishing well-being as a priority to gathering data and taking meaningful action to support staff well-being. Welcome, Pam.
Thank you for having me. I'd just like to acknowledge that I am coming from Central Alberta, which is Treaty 6 territory, the traditional land of Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux. And I am just so grateful for the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked this land that I'm on for centuries.
Thank you, Pam. So as we get going, what inspired Black Gold School Division to engage with a Well at Work advisor?
Well, I think the beginning of our journey, this happened before COVID. Our board of trustees and our superintendent acknowledged that staff wellness played an important role in the education of our students. And so they made wellness for students and staff, named it as one of our priority pillars. And then so our division principal at the time, John Ganton, was tasked with finding some way that we could collect data. We did an in-house survey, but John quickly realized he didn't feel confident in taking that information and making a step forward because he felt like he would be too biased in that decision. And so Well at Work really jumped out to him because it was a bunch of educators, right? Like business is different than education. And it was really important to him that people knew kind of what we were going through as an education staff as we went through this process. It also fit our budget at the time, so it just seemed like a perfect fit. And so John reached out to EdCan, and then as a division, we decided to move forward.
Wonderful, thank you. So Well at Work advisors support school districts in a variety of different ways. And when we worked with Black Gold, we provided a structured assessment that included reviewing the existing workplace well-being data that you had, gathering a variety of employee perspectives, and then synthesizing that information into a report that included recommendations and suggested next steps. So it's kind of a quick overview, but from your perspective, can you share a little bit more about what that process was like?
And I can speak a little bit to John's process because at this time I was a teacher in a classroom, but he said that it was really easy to connect with Carolyn, and they are Well at Work advisor, and they right away just kind of hit the ground running with a process that they wanted to do. So he needed to identify some people that would meet with her virtually. We did our participants as duos, and I think now the process is more like individual interviews, and I was lucky enough to be part of one of those duos. So I was partnered with a custodian, which was fascinating because we had a lot of stuff in common in terms of what we'd noticed in the district and what we thought or hoped we could see change. And our advisor was like super thorough and patient, and even just that process of being part of the interview felt honoring and also very cathartic, and I think everybody felt that way. And that came through in our data at the end, was that even the process of the interviews and the fact that this was now kind of becoming a priority was very important and meaningful to them. And then John said post interviews our report was pretty timely and it was very thorough. And it gave a lot of immediate actions and then goals that we could work towards. And it really just gave us a blueprint of where to go without any personal bias existing within it, which was very helpful because we wanted to ensure that financially and also effort wise, we were just getting the most bang for our bucks. So we needed to just have somebody tell us kind of where to go or suggest where we could go. And so this was beyond helpful for us in our next steps.
Yeah.
Moving
So bringing
forward.
in that neutral third party view, that outside
Yes.
look at kind of what people are looking for, what kind of the best next steps would be. Um, and then I think in our earlier conversations, having that easy to read, organized report, um, you mentioned that that made it easy to justify some of the requests and actually take immediate action. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, definitely. So broken into kind of like the systemic and the community pieces, the pieces that we could have some action on. There was some low-hanging fruit, as it's been called, things that we could do right away. But there also we were kind of streamlined. Well, maybe I'll get into some of the specifics just so that
Absolutely.
takes us forward. Okay. So one of the suggestions was that our support staff was feeling really left out of professional development because they were occurring when they were off hours. So we changed our entire PD model. There also was an indication that people wanted like more cohesive and community building support to PD. So the following year, we went with full day PD versus just the staff meetings at the end of the day kind of thing. We have one PD day a month that has a combination of hold staff time and ATA PD time and district provided PD. And then last year we had some half days where support staff could jump in and join that PD, but we actually decided to make it 4 days of full pay where they could now choose which PD they wanted to attend. But then they also have the option for 2 additional half days throughout the course of the year, paid for again at the discretion of their principal. So really trying to incorporate them as part of the process because we are like lots of times just working with the same kids with the same goals. So it's important to have them sitting at the table too.
Absolutely.
We had a WIST position already, so a
Or can
wellness.
you just say
Oh,
with
sorry, WIST.
what does it stand for?
Yeah, wellness instructional teacher, instructional support teacher. So we have lists, which are our literacy, and NISTs, which are our numeracy, and on. But our WIST role is a 0.1 FTE designation in each school building. And their job is to identify the wellness goals of that building and then work with staff and students to move them forward. So in that position, some people focus solely on staff wellness, some people focus solely on student, and a lot have turned into a combination of both. And so after the Well at Work advisory survey was complete and our report came forward, our board decided to extend those WIST roles for another year, and then that has now become a 3rd year. So each building has a wellness. It's not even like really a champion because it is, but it's also someone who's like moving the work forward. And so it goes beyond that champion, like, hey, we should be doing this. And it's like, no, we are doing this, an actionable position in the realm of wellness in each building.
At one point, there was like knowledge sharing among your WISPs as well.
Yeah, so they've created, we follow, it's called the Alberta Healthy Schools initiative. They have a survey that we follow, and this is how we collect data. And so it's got a bunch of different areas where you can impact school wellness. But each school has an action plan based on the data that they've collected in their initial survey for the year, and really understanding that like year to year, it can be flexible, right? Throw something like COVID in the mix, that's going to change entirely what you choose to focus on. So we have kind of this repository of all these action plans, things that have worked, things that maybe didn't go so well, so that it's not always a recreation of everything for each school. It can definitely they can pick and choose the pieces from different schools that work for them and move their building forward a little faster.
Perfect.
Yeah. And so from that too, things that came through in our data were we need a more streamlined vision for wellness, but also visibility and awareness. Not very many of our interviewees had even heard that we had made it a priority. So we realized that we need to get more vocal and visible with it. another thing that came through was that our senior admin, there felt like a disconnect between our central office and our staff in schools. And so our senior admin immediately like read that and have now been doing visits all the time. They pop in, they bring coffee, they just come to say hi. They do what they can to really make it known that there is that connection there. And yeah, I think that's from that, those were the ones that we hit the ground running with. Oh, also the creation of my role. We hadn't had a wellness lead teacher or a wellness head of any point, except for John's 0.6 designation. And so they hired me as a full-time wellness lead to get this work going.
Amazing. So it's quite a lot to achieve in kind of that first year after getting your reports, put a lot of pieces in place, continued a lot of things, embedded a lot of things. Because when we
Yes.
spoke last spring, there were some staff changes coming up, and you and John were working really hard to ensure that the progress you've made to date didn't disappear when that changed.
So John Ganton, our division principal, is now back at a school as a principal. We just have a 2-year stint in that role. Usually that's what the contract is. And so he was the one who was leading the WISTs. And I was just taking a secondary role for the ones that chose to focus on staff wellness versus student. And so our biggest fear is that the program that he had, worked so hard alongside all the WISTs to develop would change or not be as successful. But I think the biggest piece we decided on moving forward is that wellness needs to be individual to each building. It has to have that autonomy piece where, based on the needs of each school, that's where the work is focused. We toyed around with the idea of like a steering committee where they make decisions for everybody, but we just decided that that doesn't honor our buildings, especially when we do run the gamut from large urban centers to very small rural buildings. We have to find some way to figure out how to best help them. And so for that, that was the biggest thing. And just always the mantra that the work cannot live with us as individuals. It's not dependent on me being in this role. It's not dependent on him or even our WISTs having funding, because it's up in the air for next year, whether or not they will. It has to, we're just trying to get momentum going and bring it to the forefront of everyone's minds. And that seems to be, Well at Work helped us like really make that push quickly. Our advisory report that gave us all this information about what to do has like really brought it to the forefront of everyone, from our board of trustees to our people in our schools. And it's, it's been awesome.
Amazing. And, since then and since the spring, you've started working on some new initiatives.
We have, yeah. So it came in at the Pan Canadian Summit that just when we're talking about wellness, a huge piece of that too is also diversity and equity and inclusion for our staff, and ensuring that everybody feels psychologically safe when they come into their workplace. And so that's something that as a division we haven't really focused on up until this point, or like really visibly focused on and put time and resources into it. So we are, last year I made a survey based on other people's surveys. So it wasn't a third party. There was a little bit of upset about that, and moving forward, we'll make sure we have a third party do it for us. But with that data that we collected, I've amalgamated it all, and each school is going through it with their staff at our October staff meeting. From there, I'm facilitating and hopefully just being able to back away from employee resource groups. So basically groups that allow people to form connection, which could be based on individual characteristics, but also just amplifying and giving a voice to people that were traditionally marginalized, and also maybe not always get a chance to state their opinion at the table. And we're hoping from those groups, we are able to implement changes that are suggested based on their shared or lived Black Gold experience, that will better impact all our staff experience. So we're kind of at that point that way. We also, I do the traditional like individual pieces where there's a newsletter that goes out and there's individual challenges on the basics of wellness. But we have a Black Gold challenge, which this year is a whole year thing. And it's kind of exciting because it's just people in our report really talks about a feeling of disconnect. And so this challenge is kind of actually like bringing people together way in a way better way than I ever anticipated. And so the first year we jammed it into just May and June, but this year we're covering the whole year. We had our welcome back, and this is a Black Gold tradition, but we haven't done it in person for, it's been 3 years. And we had our welcome back in person just last week. And so it was 1,000 teachers in a rec center in one of our communities. But the Black Gold Challenge piece, the kickoff piece, was that they had to have a cheer and they had to be dressed up as 80s in 80s gear. And it was the best. Like, it completely changed the tone. It was like so loud. My parents happened to be working out in the gym and they like came down to see what was going on. It was awesome. And so just little things like that, where we're reestablishing community. It could feel like it's in a silly way, but it's almost like the push was needed to just get people to start to think about connecting outside of work again. And now that's gaining legs. And so I'm really excited to see what happens with that over the course of this year.
Amazing. Like, connection is something we hear about so often as being so important to our well-being. I'm looking forward to hearing how all these pieces roll out, like how the community and connection develop, how the DEI work progresses, and how you're able to give voice to maybe traditionally unheard voices. Is there anything else that you're kind of looking forward to for this coming year?
Well, I've noticed, well, not even noticed, they blatantly stated our board is now really focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, and also anti-racism learning and policy. And so that's really exciting for me. I think that what this has shown with the first year, I just wasn't sure if anything was going to gain legs, right? I knew how I was responding, but now we're seeing that. Like, I've been presenting to our board, I've been presenting to our admin, I've been presenting to XYZ, and just constantly talking about it. And it's kind of that, like, once you know, you can't unknow things. Like, once we know we need to do better, we have to do better. And we know, like, it's just the snowball's been rolling. And so our board has really said that they are focusing on that this year, which is very exciting, because we all know, no matter how grassroots, how many people have joined on to the cause, when there's a ceiling at the top, it gets a little tricky. But when your people who are investing are on board, then everything can change. And so that's very exciting. I'm excited to see that. And then I think we're going to switch over to guarding minds at work as our data collection, because I truly want to see things that move. And like, we know things are moving, but I also want to see things are moving.
Yes, being able to have that measurable changes over time.
Because I think, and I'm sure anyone who works in this world is like, that's the biggest pushback at times, is people say, yeah, but like, what's the difference? Like, how do you know? Like, what are the measures? And we measure what matters, but we're not sure how to measure it. So I'm hoping that that is the piece that we're missing in this equation to really just cement this as part of what we do in this division.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. There's one question in the chat that I want to include before we stop the recording, and then we can just have a bit of a conversation with the folks online. And the question is, are you a unionized environment? If so, how have you involved your employee groups outside of teachers? So you mentioned kind of those employee working groups. Are those based on union representation, or is there other ways?
Well, you know what? Like, that could be one of the factors. We've opened up our employee resource groups to anyone who's interested this first go around, right? I mean, they have to be voluntary. And so from there, we'll determine the division. So it could be, but something about having the cross connection between unions is pretty powerful too. So I'm not sure how that's going to play out. In all of our data collection, though, everyone from all of our different unions was included. And that was one of the questions we had in our survey, just so we could break it down if we needed to, but also with the option to always opt out of the question. So they didn't need to include that information if they felt like it was too identifying for them. In terms of like going through this data now, like the conversation around that, everyone will be at the table. In terms of our school support staff, custodians, everybody is invited to be part of that conversation. At our central office lens, I'm taking everybody through that work at our staff meeting. And then the invite is open for everyone to be part of the ERGs. So I think that inclusion of different unionized groups, or even we have a group of non-unionized admin support staff at our central office, and just including everybody speaks to it. Now, it gets a little tricky though, because it becomes very obvious in the data, like, especially in the written responses, like we're talking about schools and we're talking about central office, and those are very different experiences for sure. Like I've lived
Yeah.
them both now. They're quite different. I get to have hot coffee every day now. That's not the case in a school, right? But having all that data is really important, and then deciding what to do with it after, I think.
Absolutely. And even though they're different experiences, they can both be rewarding and enjoyable and positive work experiences
Exactly.
regardless.
Yeah.
All right, Pam, thank you so much.
My pleasure.